We are here today with Debra Kunkel, who is seeking the Ward 8 seat on the Springfield City Council in the April 2nd election. We appreciate you meeting with us and invite you to start by talking to voters about who you are and why you are seeking a seat on the City Council.
Okay, my name is Debra Kunkel, and I'm seeking a seat on Ward 8, where there's an open seat. I believe that our city, and basically almost every city in the United States, have come to the end of another era. The prosperity of the 60s and 70s, we got to build up, and then there was Reaganomics, and then Citizens United, and now we're kind of in a place where budgets and cuts are not enough to maintain our city. Democrats and Republicans are like a business within themselves. That's what I believe. I'm glad this is a nonpartisan position, because I always am voting for issues and not parties. The parties have become somewhat of a business themselves. They base their votes on how much campaign money they have and how many signs that they can put up all over town. I don't have any funding like that, and so I'm really happy for the coverage that I get at these interviews. Both Democrats and Republicans are out of touch with the people. People are having issues that the Democrats and Republicans skirt around and they're not addressing. We need to change the whole system. It's time to let the old times die. It's time to start a new way. We have one publicly owned utility, City Water, Light, and Power. We need more public utilities, not public entities, I would say. And that would be perhaps a bank, apartment buildings that the city can rent out. We need a source of income that does not depend on just taxes. Having to do with the public utility is the ARCH contract, which has some issues that I don't even think that the City Council is addressing at this point. But I would like for you guys to do some good investigative reporting and find out what's really going on with the ARCH contract. I have a copy of it. I have a copy of the Ely report. I don't know if you have seen them yet, but I have heard some news about the issue, and it doesn't seem to address the urgency of this contract.
Okay. And we will certainly talk more about CWLP. But first, we do want to talk about as you noted, you're running for the only open seat on City Council in this election, which by that I mean there's no incumbent in this race.
Right.
So what makes you stand out from the two other candidates seeking this seat?
What makes me stand out is my progressive views. I don't give the political rhetoric that is so common these days. Sometimes it seems like it's deny, distort, distract, deflect, and the people are just really desperate for somebody that really is going to address what they need. And I think that potholes and sidewalks and roads are very, very important. What is also important is some parts of our city still have no curbs, no sidewalks, no drainage. They're walking through what looks like the Old West on the Matt Dillon show. And these people are also the people that get talked about for not taking care of their neighborhoods or not coming off like they're taking care of their yards. And a lot of times, if you don't have nice things, you don't feel like you can. I mean, who's going to try to walk through mud to pick up something or do something? So it's an issue that, yes, we need to maintain what we have, and yes, we need to start some new capital projects. I know that there's I don't know if it's a referendum, a rule, a law right now that there is no capital funding for rock and tar roads. And pretty much that, to me, that really takes the poorer neighborhoods out of the equation altogether.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You mentioned some issues like sidewalks, alleys, those types of things. Are those the most pressing issues you're seeing in Ward 8? Or tell us the issues you'd like to most address
When
in
I
that
go
ward.
to door in Ward 8, and this is something I like to talk to people about, because I think if there is a buckle in the sidewalk, actually, while I was out getting signatures, I tripped on one of those because I was looking at my clipboard, and my knees still aren't the same. So I think, dangerous spots should be addressed. And the most things I heard, especially out of young people, was we need housing. We need somewhere to live that we can afford. We need, when I was young, my dad told me, and he was a very smart man, and he said, never spend over a quarter of your budget, a quarter of your earnings on your housing or your payment. And I think that was very smart, because I've always lived that way, and I always have money for my incidentals. There are young people out there choosing between food and rent. A young man the other day, I gave him a ride. My son has a mechanic shop, and I gave him a ride home when he dropped off his car, and just asked him about it and how he feels about it. He's working 2 jobs, and he says a total 3/4 of his income goes to his rent, and it's not that nice of a place. So I know that that's been a big deal about, landlord accountability and signing up and all that stuff. But if the city would take some of the downtown area that needs done anyway and build some pretty much high-rise, low-maintenance, minimalist apartments that they could rent out at a price that young people, older people, anyone could afford, all solar, that would be a good start to our city having a commodity. There would be rent coming in, there would be the prospect of income in the future. I believe that anything that this city builds should not only benefit the people, but also give us more money for things that we need.
Citywide, we'd say one of the pressing issues facing Springfield is homelessness.
Yeah.
How do you think Springfield officials can address that?
I think it's the same that's at the root of every problem of every town in the United States. We've become numb and immune to seeing homelessness and poor people and the things that they need. Our government is so out of touch with the public. They have the Democrat side and the Republican side, and they argue against each other. Nobody is arguing for the people. If it doesn't start at a federal level or even a global level, can we start it in the city? A living wage, it starts it right there. The apartments downtown, then downtown starts getting more businesses, and if we had to, our own publicly owned bank. We could set the interest rates for our projects at what we can afford. We could do the projects we need to start making more money to have money. And I'm not saying we should compete with capitalism. It's not a competition. But just that if our city doesn't own more things and we just depend on the budget and cutting programs, we're just going to get more and more in the hole. I don't see us being fiscally sound if we don't have a source of income. And they've already said taxes aren't enough anymore. So now they need to cut some stuff, and I don't think that's the answer. The answer is we need a new system.
Would you foresee some of those the funding from what you're proposing, helping the homeless? I guess I'm not clear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What
yes.
You're saying.
Once we have it all kind of circles around, and once we have a living wage, and once we have places for people to live that they can afford, and the small businesses follow suit, the homeless situation takes care of itself, because people, some of the apartments could be earmarked for the homeless. We could have a jobs program for the homeless. We could do all kinds of things. If we think out of the box, all of the problems could be gone. Just got to start somewhere that's not the same. If we can start somewhere and make some laws that will benefit us in the future, we can get through the next few years, decades, maybe a decade, and then at least have some income to look forward to move even forward. The more solar we get, the more solar we generate, the more our city has solar, number one. Number two, we can start selling it to other cities. So commerce, business, our city needs to put itself out there and not just depend on the people for taxes.
Another big issue has been economic development. How do you see the city, how should the city go about attracting more businesses to Springfield?
Same. I mean, it all goes back to the same thing. You offer a minimum wage or a living wage that is a minimum of at least $15. Mm-hmm. Then people have the money to spend on businesses. They can, if you're paying 3/4 of your earnings for rent, you can't buy a car, you can't buy clothes and shoes and groceries. So all of this enters into it. Even the downtown apartments, if we could have the high-rise apartments downtown to wake up the downtown, it's also leaving a smaller carbon footprint because there are people downtown with no vehicles that are going to take public transportation or walk. And then there's a need for more businesses downtown. I think that our larger businesses, of course, would start with the minimum wage. Walmart, McDonald's, and such. Then as those employees start buying more things from small businesses, the small businesses will pick up and our city will start being healthy again. Like I said, every city is having this problem. This is not us, not every city, but the cities that are solvent have already done some unconventional things. And I think we need to follow suit and do those things.
So is $15 a minimum wage? What do you, or
I'm
a
saying
living wage?
$15 is a living wage, and I know we don't start there. These things are done over time, with small businesses being, the last ones to have to do that. Of course, we don't want our small businesses to go away, but the large businesses that are giving our young people part-time work and they're not giving them any benefits, which is another point of contention, is our health system. They can afford to pay a living wage, and they can afford full-time help, and they depend on our welfare system to take care of their employees, so they can pay them less and make more.
One of the approaches the county and the city and other existing businesses have taken to improve economic development is creating the Land of Lincoln Economic Development Corporation. It's still getting off the ground, but how would you describe its progress?
I have read a little bit about it, and I think that it's a good idea. I think it's going to lead to good things. It's not quite got off the ground, like you said, but I think we're working towards something good in that respect, yes.
Okay. The city provided $250,000 last year for the EDC. It's going to provide the same, or it's in the budget to provide another $250,000 this year as well. Is that an expense you think is good for the city?
I do,
Okay.
yes.
The council has had, or the city has had some tough fiscal times the last couple of years.
Yes.
And the city council approved tax increases during the last 2 years to provide additional revenue for the services, particularly thinking of the sales tax increase, the hotel motel increase, the telecom increase. We know you weren't on council,
Yes.
but if you were on council at the time those votes came on, how do you think you would have voted?
I would not have voted for the tax increases.
Any of them?
No.
Okay.
I think that there's enough on our citizens' backs. I do think we could have our own broadband. That would bring in money. Plus, we would not have to worry about net neutrality if we had that. As far as the other tax raises, if you're creative, you can think of ways to make money without raising taxes, and it would go back to these businesses, but be on them instead of our citizens.
The city's financial situation has stabilized this year. But if you were on council and you were faced with the budget every year, what principles would you adhere to in order for you to be in favor of that budget? You know, like what would you be looking? Would you be going line by line? Would you be looking for certain things in there, cuts? What would that budget need for you to be approving?
I would study the budget, and yes, I research all things. Like I researched the arch contract that the city signed. Actually, they signed it on for another 5 years in like 2016. And I wanted to research that, and I did, and I have found some stuff in the contract that aren't satisfactory, and I have also found the very Ely report that the city purchased using tax dollars is actually adverse to the contract altogether. So having to research, look at a budget and research, I would not be agreeing to cuts for our public services, not for our police officers, not for our firemen, not for our city parks. If the cuts were necessary, we would have to really take a look at those and talk about some other ideas before we actually do that.
One of the pensions are taking up a larger share of the city's budget every year, particularly for police and fire.
Right.
Certainly an issue throughout the state. It's not just Springfield. The city is limited by the legislature in a lot of ways and how it can address its pensions. But what type of pension reforms would you like to see?
I don't think we need pension reforms. I think we need government reform. I'm sorry, but I think that if people always used to have a pension. Families took a vacation every year. You had something to look forward to when you retired. Unions and pensions are the background of they're the only things keeping us alive right now, actually. And I truly believe that we need more pensions, more unions, and I think that if I were going to make a cut, that would definitely not be where it's going to be. I think that the pensions are solvent right now, and I think actually with the police, I think like for 24 years, and they're running with a deficit, but they're also going to overcome that. So I kind of looked at the finances about it, and it looks like they're going to do all right.
I think they're about 44% funded right now.
From what I saw, it looked like they have more than what they need to get through the next few years.
Okay, but long term, I guess, you don't think there's any reforms needed to ensure those pensions are there that have been earned by retired employees?
I'm sorry, what?
Long term. They may be fine for the next few years, but there is a lot of concern that money won't be there in the future.
And it's the same thing as I've been saying all along.
Okay.
We have to have our own city public entities that we can make money off of. We can't just keep taxing. We can't. Reaganomics started it. I'm sure we need to tax the rich more because ever since Reaganomics, things have gone downhill. We have not been able to rebuild. We only see things crumbling and crumbling. And now that we're at the point where we need to rebuild, the tax laws might have to change, but our citizens here in our city have taken on enough taxes. It's not just property taxes. You have taxes all across the board, no matter what you do. And that's after the fact that the federal taxes are taken out of your check before you get it. So the amount of money that people really have beyond the government is not a lot.
Do you think by having, so let's say the city owned an apartment complex, that building would no longer be paying property taxes, which means the rest of the property tax payers would have to make up for that? How do you make up for that difference? Is the rent they're bringing in gonna
Yes.
balance? Is it gonna be more than what they're paying in property taxes?
You
do
have to
think?
look at the big picture, whereby they are paying rent that they can afford, and they're out there in the city buying more things, making the businesses stronger. They have more of a incentive to go out there to work because they're making a good wage. Right now, the younger people are a little bit frozen because they can't make enough money and they don't know where to go from here. And it's also environmental concerns and other concerns. So we need to not just have more money so our city will be better, but we need to make it better for them. They're going to have children who are going to have children, and we can't just keep doing the same things we've always done because we're getting farther and farther behind.
You've mentioned the Arch contract a couple times, just briefly, because we do have several more questions we want to try to cover in our time. CWLP, can you give us your concerns there again briefly, and other issues you see with CWLP?
Well, the city had to give CWLP a stimulus, about $4.5 million a couple of years ago, I think. But right now, CWLP is solvent. And I see, for the future of CWLP, I would like to see them, I know they've already got one little solar farm, and I would like to see more solar. Not necessarily out there in a field, but as our city, as things need repaired, to repair those things with solar, all electric solar. And always maybe solar street lights or such that we're always having I'm sorry. Cut. I forgot the question.
Top concerns about CWLP.
CWLP. Okay. Oh, I hope that gets cut out of there, but never mind. It's all right. I do this all the time. So, City Water, Light, and Power are connected with the city, who is connected with Arch Coal, which we've had a contract since, I think the 1980s. It's all gone very, very well up until Mayor Davlin, and ever since like 2007 or 8, the contract has not been arbitrated. It has not been looked at. So I think there's arbitration every third year of every 5-year contract, and nobody has taken advantage of that up until 2016. So all of that time from 2008 to 2016, we were overpaying for coal to the tune of maybe $5 million a year or more. So that was all, wasted money. Our people in our city don't deserve that. They deserve someone that's watching and paying attention. So as I see the new contract that replaces the old contract, the safeguards are gone. There is no more arbitration in the contract. There's no negotiations in the contract. The contract, I've been told that it's up to look at in December, but it is December of 2020. But there's also a stipulation in Article 17 that we have to decide whether or not we're going to renew this contract for another 10 years. But that's not happening in December. That's happening now. Like, we need to do that. As soon as these elections are over, it's going to have to be voted on. And the Ely report clearly says that we should not get into a long-term contract with Arch Coal. Okay. So I love our city. I love our mayor. I love our city council. And I think that with the information they were given, that they maybe have signed things that they need to look at again. Okay. People get very, very busy. And I know if I were the mayor, I would have other people telling me what I need to do. And trusting those people. So I don't know what happened with this contract. because I do trust our city officials. I'm just sure that this needs to be revisited. It has to be done soon. It has to be done fast, because if this goes through, again, we're going to lose in excess of $15 million the first year. I mean, they say we're saving $5 million a year with this 5-year contract we have right now. But no, we're just saving $5 million from when we were paying $45 a ton, and now they've brought it down. Why there's been no arbitration all that time, I have no idea. But this should have been directly dealt with years ago.
Okay. On a couple other topics, what do you think should go on the Y block?
Apartments,
Apartments?
yes. Apartments and a courtyard or a small park, something like that. When I'm talking apartments, I'm talking, like I said, minimalist apartments that millennials could afford, that elderly people could afford, that aren't they're publicly owned, but they're not public housing. They're we can set the rent, and I think that would also create some competition with the landlords in this town to reduce some rent. The rent is out of control. I imagine 4 young people could rent a maybe 3-bedroom house and maybe make it if all 4 of them were paying. So,
Capital Township is another hot topic of late. Do you think
Yes.
it should be merged, and if so, with the county or the city?
if it is merged, I think it should be with the city.
Okay.
And another thing about that is I believe any duplicate services that we do get rid of, that needs to benefit people, or any merging we enter into, even if 2 schools merge together, that has to benefit the kids. This is not like, okay, now we have extra money to do something else. I mean, I remember the lotto way back when they said that the proceeds were going to go to education. And I voted for that because I thought that meant over and above what they already have. I don't think anybody knew that our schools would be in such trouble right now, and teachers buying their own supplies and et cetera. I'm a substitute teacher here in this area, and I don't do it very often, but I am registered, and when I go into our schools, I even think we could have another source of income would be daycare in public schools. It would be a Montessori style that I imagine, and we could be a state-of-the-art city if we would take some ideas and actually follow through with one of them and see how we do, and then take it from there.
Okay.
Any other? Okay.
I think we've covered it.
Well, we thank you, Debra, for meeting with us today and invite you to give a brief closing statement as to why voters should choose you on Election Day.
Okay, well, what you've heard here today is not what you usually hear from any non-progressive candidate. So I would just like to say it's not the usual rhetoric. It's not the usual pacifying and just saying what people want to hear. I truly, truly think that I love the city of Springfield, and I feel like if we did some state-of-the-art moves here in our city, we could be the first city that starts something that might just go across the country. We can't see any other way anymore because the Democrats and Republicans are pretty much they've taken control of the conversation, and if the conversation goes anywhere else, they might think you're a nut or a troublemaker. I don't want to be that way. I don't want to criticize them, but I would like to see more progressive candidates and more people with good ideas to do more with our city, so that we can be solvent and our citizens can be dignified and safe.